I'm also a SENS alumni. Glad to be part of the community and share the experience of social business that I've been collecting, visiting, understanding, researching everything for about 6 years now. So present myself again. I'm Fernando. I'm Brazilian. Now I'm working as a policy analyst for the OECD with investment policy issues. But I've been producing this documentary. It's called Between Worlds that I'll talk about. I'll lead you through the presentation. And we've created a 2.5 sector project, which is the producer of the documentary and also doing a lot of the things to promote social businesses in Brazil. I'll go through my presentation. It's going to be quick. I'll present you briefly my project, what we mean by social business, what are the new paradigms. Rafael asked me to bring you a little bit of data. I'll try to. I'll show you a little bit of the market, the advantages of social businesses and how they're actually transforming the social sector. And I'll use 2 cases, which probably is known for everyone, but about the challenges of social businesses. And I think it's going to be an interesting discussion at the end based on the challenges that I've encountered in the field. Am I going too fast? I think everyone is able to understand, right?
Yes, perfect.
I'll start with the project. The idea was to inspire young business leaders from mainly business schools in Brazil. The project started when I wanted to create a microcredit institution in Brazil. So I've started researching the field and wanted to go to Bangladesh to meet Yunus and see how Grameen Bank worked and bring the case to my school and continue from that. But then talking to the people in the social sector, at the time I was consulting for NGOs and the government, and I was closely linked to Ashoka and meeting with the Ashoka fellows. And they started talking to me about, but have you seen different business models in different sectors, not only the financial sector? And then it's when I learned about how business could actually be done differently and how they could actually address some of the most important social challenges we have in society. So the idea of the project was, how do we promote this concept in Brazil that it still is so unknown, actually, especially for a business school. And from a business case to academic case studies, we ended up with a documentary that's probably going to, the main goal is to go to cinema, but also to TV shows. So I think we'll be able to leverage a lot on our experience. And the fact that we started this project, we kind of coined the term the 2.5 sector in Brazil. And it's often entrepreneurs come and say, can I call myself a 2.5 sector project? And I'll let you know quickly a trailer of the movie so that you can understand what we're talking about. Just a second. Let's see if it works.
Part of humanity, but you did not care about certain others. That's part of it too. Does it relate to market failures? Absolutely. But what I do believe is that market-based principles actually offer the best solution to trying to address poverty.
The business sector has been growing on its own, and the social sector has been growing on its own. Unfortunately, it never came together. Primero hay que desarrollar capacidad y después hay que generar oportunidades. Podemos tener gente muy capaz, con mucho talento humano, intelectual, emocional,
Pero si no están ahí las oportunidades, nunca va a ser posible un desarrollo estable y de largo plazo.
Happily, there are lots of people who are recognizing there are ways to develop businesses where the end goal is not just to have financial profitability.
So, hope you guys liked it.
Yeah, it is really inspiring movie and very interesting, and I think we are all looking forward to see the full version. When are you expecting actually to have the final version?
We expect to start the distribution by the end of this year. We still need to do a final production in Brazil. But then we're probably doing this early next semester, and then we expect to have the movie ready to be commercialized, distributed by the end of the year, actually. But what is interesting about the movie is no one that started this project was actually from the movie industry. I've never actually done a movie before. I just wanted to go and meet the people and research and transmit the information. So this movie was shooted in different locations worldwide: Brazil, India, Mexico, Bangladesh, especially, and we've met with probably the most important people in the social business sector nowadays, actually. So it was an enriching experience. We've interviewed, as Rafael introduced you, more than 30 social business entrepreneurs, more than 50, almost 60 people related to the field, either academics or people from CEOs of multinational companies or companies and all this. And it was very important for me to get the view of what is going on in the sector, how the difference between regions, and what are the main challenges that these entrepreneurs are actually facing. So it was very fruitful. So moving on, what we talk about this 2.5 sector. It's not very clear for everyone, so I'll explain. In Brazil, we have this separation of terms. The second sector is considered the corporate sector, and the third sector is what we call the social sector, NGOs and all this. The first sector is the government. What we've seen is this movement of social business entrepreneurs blending together these two concepts. And most of the times, we've seen two types of entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs coming from the social sector and moving to a social business model, but also social entrepreneurs from the social sector, NGOs, traditional NGOs, changing their business models to become more of a social business. So the definitions that we've seen of social business are very large or very different, actually, from different regions. In America, for instance, United States, it's a very broad definition. In the UK, it's more restricted, and they even have a legal framework for it. Australia has it, Canada has it. But most of the countries don't have a legal framework. I'll talk about this later on. But what we've seen that they have two essential characteristics. They have a clear theory of change, and they adopt profitable business strategies. So we focus on three within the 2.5 sector, we see three models actually in a general sense. The social businesses, which are the ones that have BOP, about bottom of the pyramid population, as customers, and these products and services actually bring additional social benefits for this population. Then there is the social insertion companies that try to integrate marginalized people within their supply chain. And then there is the fair trade companies the fair trade companies introduced within the supply chain, and the social insertion companies provide direct employment to these people. So I'll give an example. This might not be very understood, this term. It's La Fareda business case in Spain with producing yogurts, and they employ disabled people, and they are very productive, very competitive. They compete with big companies and all this. Fair trade, everyone knows it, and social business are. Then within social business, you have different also models, and this we can discuss later on. So this is what we're talking. They are revolutionizing the traditional business paradigm by blending together these two things, economic return and social impact. And this is not a trade-off. This comes together, but what we've seen is that this is a continuous in terms of risk appetite for both social impact and financial returns. So you see this later on. Why cannot change my slide? Okay. So as Rafał asked me to bring a little bit of data, I'm not sure if everyone has ever digged into that a little bit, but I've wrote a business plan of a social impact investing fund in Brazil. Was the first one that my friend, my colleague, my co-founder of this project with me actually started. It is, we are talking about a 5 trillion BOP market in the world as estimated by the World Resources Institute and the International Financial Corporation in 2005. So as you can see on the left is the population with under $3,000 a year in income segment, and it's quite large market. But I wouldn't perhaps call this estimates. I would say it's more like a guess. I'm not sure how these numbers are actually taken. Being from the OECD, I know that it's very complicated to have a clear understanding of things. But what is interesting is when we started to see this market as an emerging asset class for investments, then is when you start to mobilize resources. And I'll give an example. JP Morgan in 2010 have estimated that investment could reach about $1 trillion in 10 years. This would be around a little bit more than 1% of total assets under management in the financial industry. So it's a very tiny, almost invisible market within 10 years. It will still be very tiny, but 1 trillion, it's you can have some fun. It's already a market that you can do things. So here you see the spectrum of investment. When you're talking about social sector, you go from normal charities, which is mainly impact driven. And I've talked to so many people, and many have told me, "Oh, I don't see how charities will compete with social businesses in the future." What I believe is there will be enough room for different business models. Some sectors will still need to have a charity model to address some of the issues. And then moving on, you see potentially sustainable businesses, break-even businesses, profitable surplus reinvested. So this is the Yunus model. And then profit distribution, socially driven, which is more the focus of impact investment, I would say, and it's probably the models that are going to reach scale faster. and I believe that they have a very strong case for delivering social impact while delivering financial returns. But just to make a difference, this is an impact first oriented model. So decisions by managers are taken to maximize the social impact and not the financial returns. And then you move on to more traditional terms where financial returns have come first, which if you take, for instance, sustainability indexes and all this, these firms, they minimize their social, the negative impacts, but they strive for financial returns, whereas the social businesses strive for social impact while being financially sustainable. So I believe that once you manage to bring a market and attract investment, then you have some potential. I'll give you an example of the water and telecoms sector. I was talking to Rafael the other day. The amount of investment, once you start, you get to put a price, a market price to your services or product, then you attract investment and you can reach a lot of people. You see the telecommunications market. If you compare the necessity of mobile phones and water, it's the population to judge, but I would guess that people would give more importance to water, clean water, than telephones. But everyone pays a bill for telephones and water. You pay a market price for your telephone, but you don't pay a market price for your water, usually subsidized. But then you don't bring investment to water as well with a subsidized model. And then the reach of water market to the population, access to water, is much lower because of historical low investments in the sector compared to the telecoms market, for instance. Of course, changes in technology, changes on business models, all this. But the fact that you managed to bring a market, the telecommunications market used to be government-driven as well earlier. Now that it's a market-based price, you've attracted investors and you've been able to expand considerably the services being delivered to the population. So this is, I think, is where social businesses can actually bring a lot of potential. I've seen that three things when discussing to social businesses and entrepreneurs. They've talked to me about three differencing things that have enabled them to grow, actually, and to make a difference. The first thing is access to capital. I'll give you an example. SKS Microfinance in India is the largest microfinance in the world after in India. Sorry, is the largest in India. As the market capitalization, they recently did an IPO. He started with an NGO business model as Yunus, and then he had so huge. Well, everyone knows transaction costs are high, fixed costs are high. You have very small size of transactions. You need volume to be profitable and to expand your services. And by doing this, you can decrease your interest rates. And he had a very tough decision. He had to move from this NGO model to a commercially driven model where he would be able to remunerate investors. And once he did this, he started this huge growth. And nowadays, it's probably the most important microfinance institution in the world. It's recognized as with the best structures. And he completely changed the business model. But this was a significant and critical issue for them to deliver the impact that they wanted. They've been able to reach a scale never seen before in the industry. But the thing that changes is also moving from a project-based business model, as many NGOs, to a product or service-based business model. Once you have a product, your life cycle of a product or a service is much, much longer than a project-based business model. In an NGO, traditionally, the founder or the director spend so many times talking to potential investors. I mean, on a day-by-day basis, what he does is fundraise. When you have a structure that allows you to think in a long-term basis as a product or services, you don't need to do the same fundraising activity every year because you're bringing investors, you have a long-term perspective, so the way that you can plan things is much better. So the business solution is actually what makes a huge difference. Then going through a business model, social innovation, the thing that they can become partners to companies because they understand how companies work, they can integrate the value chain. This is the case of Ashoka initiative. They have very good cases like with Amanco in Mexico, working with social entrepreneurs, integrating their value chain, like creating benefits for the population, for the multinational company, and also for the business, for the social business entrepreneur. And then you have the possibility of attracting talents, because once you can somehow remunerate your talent closer to what this talent would be able to get in the normal traditional market, then you start to bring in people with capacity, with people with analytical possibilities, and with will. But will is not enough. You need to have the capacity. So you need to attract people, and this is something that the social business model can do better than the traditional NGO in a sense. So high-scale impact is the goal. They have a perennial business model strategies with products and services. They think about replicating the business model, which is very different from traditional companies where they don't want to replicate. They want to hold to their business model. They don't want to share things because they want to get their market. In a social business context, you want to multiplicate your social impact. So you are more than willing to have someone replicating a business model in a different locations, or even if you can do this in your location, you'll be able to reach your goals faster. And political commitment and influence on public policy. This is something that has starting. It's very in an early stage, I would say. But the fact that they've been able, for instance, in the UK, Canada, and Australia, to have a legal framework supporting these ventures is actually something that's really important, because many of the social entrepreneurs face troubles in finding the legal framework more adaptable to their goals and business models. So I'll enter on the challenges. I'll try to go very concise here, because probably you guys are already aware of these projects. So Grameen Danone Foods, one of the first social business model, as Yunus proposed, with a multinational company, delivering a very affordable yogurt, working with local suppliers, working on a proximity business approach with the radios between suppliers and customers, and operating on the Yunus method, profitable, but reinvesting all the profits after remunerating the initial investment capital by investors, and trying to address the problem of subnutrition, extreme subnutrition in Bangladesh. But what are the challenges that this model has faced? So they had all the troubles that you can imagine, actually. They started with the local suppliers was an issue. Small suppliers in Bangladesh, rural Bangladesh, they have one cow or two. And whenever the market price was higher than what Danone was willing to pay on a regular basis throughout the year, they would supply the local market and not Danone anymore. So they had very disruptions on the supply chain. It was very complicated to deal with this. So the idea was to get these local suppliers to get the microcredit with Grameen Bank to buy another cow, to increase their production and the quality. It was very complicated. They could not do this at the early phase. so they couldn't reach a scale. They had to go to a private farm now, working with cooperatives to build a stable supply, and then working on I'd say on a marginalized way with small suppliers close to the factory. This is a very strong social impact that they were willing to have, and that it was not that clear cut. It wasn't that easy to do. Then they had problems with the factory itself. It was operating at a very low capacity use, 50% more or less, because they were operating in this 30 kilometers proximity business approach. They were selling through rural ladies. The ladies would reach rural communities to sell the yogurts, and they had a very hard time to do this because the ladies were not willing to work more. Once they had sold everything, they were not willing to work more. They were fine with that. It was very complicated. Then they had this to reach some scale. They had to start selling at the city center, at Bogra. But the center, you don't reach anymore the people, the population that you were targeting at the beginning, because urban centers are more rich people. They were consuming your yogurt. So they started to operate on a cross subsidization model. They had problems with the marketing. They was first marketing things, material, was written paper, but no one can read. So they had to figure out how to convey their message of the importance of the yogurt and meet their competitors. It was a very competitive market that they entered, actually. Then they had problems with the cold chain. The cold chain, they would sell through the retail stores in the urban centers, for instance. But the urban centers, people don't have electricity enough electricity for maintaining their products refrigerated. So they had to go and talk to Grameen Bank to finance some photovoltaic panels for the small shops in the city center. So many issues they had to face on electricity issues. It was also a problem for local suppliers. They could not store the milk that they were producing with quality. So once you have an idea, you think you have it all, but once you start your project, then you start to realize what are actually the challenges, the operational challenges of a social business are much broader than a normal business. The engineers of Danone, they had to struggle to find techniques to produce a yogurt at cheap price. And it's really affordable. It's 7 cents per container. They had to use the old production techniques that they had in the 60s in France. They started using second-hand equipment, something that they have never taught before. It was really an innovation laboratory for the engineers, because talking to them, they thought at the beginning, it's just crazy, it's not possible to do it. Then they have to challenge every assumption, a normal assumption of a traditional business model. So challenges are huge here. And the main challenge is, how do you keep your mission going, but at the same time you need to be flexible to reach scale, because you need to showcase the success. At the same time, reaching scale might imply that you're not anymore addressing fully your initial target mission. So this is a very complicated phase for entrepreneurs in general. We've seen this in all models that we managed to. Well, perhaps I won't enter, I'm taking too long, I won't enter in the Arvin I case. One thing that's particularly incredible in this case, the entrepreneur, Dr. V, he started this hospital thinking on a McDonald's. He completely reconsidered all the procedures, normal procedures in a traditional hospital, to specialize and disintegrate the process in a way that they could bring, that the doctors, physicians would only do the doctor's work. They wouldn't be talking to patients, and every consultation in a normal American hospital, for instance, would take an hour with the doctor, I don't know, half an hour. There, they operate, every surgery takes like 10 minutes at most. for a simple surgery. So the productivity is huge, and that's how they've managed to have a high scale. They have a very interesting business model. There's 2 hospitals. One hospital is free, and the other one is paid. It's the customer that decides to which one to go, actually. If you decide to go to the paid hospital, you'll be financing 2 free surgeries, actually. And what this means is that the treatment is the same. The technicalities is the same. It's just that one hospital, you have better facilities than the other. You have a room, you have air conditioning, perhaps, those things. That is not the case in the other one. And they completely changed the way to do business as well. Most of the times, the customer needs to go to the hospital. But in India, as you see the numbers, 70% of the population live in rural areas, and 80% of the doctors are in urban centers. This means that if someone in a rural area wants to go to a hospital, they need to go to an urban center. It means that they stop working. It's more or less one day that they lose. It's one day of work, actually. So it's one day of their children are not eating, one day of the problems with the family, leaving them alone, and all this. So the way that this guy did was, well, we go with the doctors to the rural areas. He created these eye camps, and they do all this screening of 500 people in a day, and those that really need to do a surgery, they are brought to the hospital, taken care. They do the surgery there, and then they are brought back to their communities. They also operate some telecenters using technology to deliver the services, to do the screening or something, and they're following, accompanying their clients in a later stage. But the most impressive is our lab, because the intraocular lenses that they bought used to cost too high. It was they had to buy from German and French companies. So what they did was, well, if we want to bring the cost down and be operational and break even, we need to produce these lenses ourselves. And they've started a company which now has sales to more than 80 or 100 countries. They've started exporting. They have the same quality, labeled by the World Health Organization. So this was a real business model. I've never seen, this was the first social business entrepreneur that I've seen vertically integrating, actually. It's just crazy. Now it's a company, operates, sells to other countries, not only to Aravind, but the price of cost of the intraocular lenses is now about $5. Used to cost $150. So imagine multiply this by the amount of surgeries that they do per day. You just have an idea of the economics, the savings that they are having. I think for me, this is the most impressive social business in the world, actually. The way that they deliver, the way that they were able to maintain their mission and keep with the goal of reaching scale, that was just impressive. So just to conclude, and then we can start a discussion, the mindset is to replicate, as I said. They're not willing to, you see Aravind, for instance, they help people start other Aravind hospitals in the world. They're not willing to protect their own concept. Very often, entrepreneurs are using hybrid models. They are trying to unbundle some of the activities. So some of the activities are performed by an NGO, and then whenever possible, they do a social business to develop a market-based solution, but they have to disintegrate these things sometimes. These hybrid models work in very different sectors. You need to be patient, especially for impact investors, for instance. The maturity of a social business model is much, much longer. For impacting investor, we are talking about a maturity of 7 years. Then we don't have a legal framework. Usually a fund is about to 10 years. You need to have an investment period of 5 years. It's very complicated. You need to restart a new fund so that we can sell from a fund, pass a portfolio to another. But yes, the maturity is longer. That's for sure. There's no way we can do this. And if perhaps in the microfinance industry, it might be faster because it's more consolidated. But otherwise, maturity is much longer than a normal traditional business where you're thinking about a maturity in 3 to 5 years. Here, you're talking about at least 7, I think. Scale is definitely important. That's where social business are making a difference. If you're trying to operate a social business and you don't reach scale, something is not going right, I think. Perhaps it would be better with an NGO model, I don't know. But scale is crucial. The way of reaching scale is very complicated and poses a lot of challenges to entrepreneurs, including bringing external finance, bringing investors to your venture, and losing ownership and working with governance issues. It's complicated because also perhaps you need to be more flexible on your mission delivery. There's a long debate here. If you do flexibilize a little bit your missions goals, we will ever be able to return to it at the regional. It's complicated. And the legal structures, I think this is something that we need as a social business community. We need to be working on with our governments because in Brazil, for instance, if you're starting a social business that you have a longer maturity period, that you have very many complicated things because of affordability and all this, you don't have scale at the beginning, and you don't have a legal structure that allows you to make a difference between an NGO and a normal company, where normal company needs to pay all the taxes and all this, and you don't have the incentives for a social business. Is just much harder than a traditional one, I think. I think the legal frameworks are usually not very adaptable to social businesses because NGOs are also not the right thing because sometimes you have restrictions on remunerating your directors, so you have very many legal complications to develop your project. Well, this is one of the talks that I've been discussing with entrepreneurs. I hope everyone enjoyed them. Sorry, I've seen now that I've taken so long, but if this is helpful, we can start the discussion now.